So an interesting thing is relating the body to alchemical practices, and if we eat food, we first chew it and kind of mix it with saliva in the mouth, which then goes to mainly the stomach, and that pretty much dissolves and I would assume breaks it down into like a very like a particled mush liquid, like a mud almost. You mix dirt and water and something a bit like that, and eventually it goes into your bowels and it ferments essentially, and then it comes out, right? And you use that to fertilize the earth. Now, in the stomach, it's very much related to dissolving or digesting of metal or herbs or animal products and parts, right? We have a material, maybe it's like some roots or some ore or metal or some meat or something. We want to turn it into some kind of edible substance, at least specifically for the case of medicinal alchemy, medicinal practices. But even if you're trying to make something like paints or inks or glues or something, usually there's a process of processing and digesting the material. And this is very relational to what happens in the stomach. And the stomach uses, I guess, acids and heat, and who knows, maybe heat and pressure or something. I actually don't really know. Maybe it moves it around again. I don't really know. And then finally goes to the bowels, and it's very interesting because the bowels relate to fermentation. So I guess fermentation is related to, it's a Saturnian thing. It's related to death and rebirth. And the alchemists, of course, would use dung to cover like a flask or something they wanted to keep heated. If they couldn't keep it heated in like a sand bed or a water bed or something, keep that on a furnace or a stove or whatever, and they would use dung because it would continuously produce heat. Excrement continuously produces heat and gases. Some people will put it into, there are these like methane or like gas creation devices, which is pretty much just a big plastic like soft plastic bag where people put excrement and food scraps in, and what happens is that the excrement will cause it to ferment. So the same way we put yeast into fruit or sugar, wine or something, some kind of thing we want to ferment, you can use it for, well, I wouldn't be using excrement to make wine, but you get the point. You can use it to ferment things. Like will affect, or impose effects on things. Similar things will impose things on similar things. Essentially what happens when food and organic matter, rots, it turns into a form of excrement. It ferments, it rots, it gives off its volatile gases. And so what happens in that gas collector, people hook it up to a bottle to collect it, or they hook it up to a stove and they can cook off that because it's a volatile, flammable, it's a spiritual gas full of energy, full of spiritual energy, right? This methane or whatever gas that's created, right? And you can light it on fire and cook food with it, which is it's like a nice, environmentally friendly way to do things. But it's similar to a farmer puts dung all over the field and mixes it in with the dirt, and they put things like shells and certain rocks, if they like phosphorus bearing, calcium bearing, potassium bearing rocks and such, bones and carcasses and food scraps and all kinds of things, right? they mix it in, and it's the dung kind of helps to, I would imagine, to cause it to ferment and to rot and to break down, right? And which then fertilizes the field. Because otherwise, if you just throw scraps on a dry field, it's not really going to, the scraps will probably dry out, right? So you kind of need that, like, you need enough moisture, you need enough shade, you need enough all of that. And of course, the vessel for fermentation, similarly to digestion and similarly to, a womb, is usually a dark, enclosed space with heat and pressure, and it's a gentle heat. Digestion can be a more aggressive heat. The idea of the gut being marsh and the gut being full of fire. The heat coming from the intestines. You eat for warmth. Calories is a measurement of warmth, right? Then the bowels being, again, it's similar to the underground of the earth. It's dark, but it's the underground of the earth is cold. Depending how far down, I'm talking about like a meter, it's cold. For fermentation, you want it warm and kind of moist. It's like when mushrooms relate to this. They grow out of cow dung. Some mushrooms do, or they grow out of the earth near certain trees, and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess you could probably understand more alchemical concepts relating to the body, but otherwise there'd be a lot of interesting experiments to do. Of course, working with crap is not exactly the most pleasant thing, and you probably don't really want to be doing it in the cities or the suburbs or anything, because it would smell bad and it would, be a bit unpleasant to yourself and everyone around you. But I'm sure there's a lot of experiments you could do around that. I know the Egyptians, they got their liquor hepatis, which I think means like liquor of the liver or something, from I think it was dung, camel dung, and some other things. And they said it was they used it as a perfume or something. For all that's worth, I don't know. And then you can look at things like sulfur, the idea of sulfurous gases, the idea of sulfurous, like burning in sulfur. Does sulfur, is there a way to get heat from it? Does it produce heat? Does it somehow relates to fermentation? Again, the smell of crap is partially a sulfurous smell. It's not part of it, at least. It's also partly things that are warm and moist and in the dark have a particular smell as well. Not just crap, but other things as well. So things of an animal and organic, then again, these are all these different smells. But this is really, it's getting into an idea of life, and the generation of life in the womb, of course, is a sealed vessel full of like a liquid. I don't know if it's a thick liquid, like a gel or something, or if it's like a thin liquid, like a water. I'm not sure. But it's similar. It's, the process of gestation is similar to the process of fermentation. The baby is essentially growing in this dark, enclosed, warm, wet, underwater, and in water kind of area. And this idea of the enclosed, warm, wet area is essentially, it's like life exists in this area. Like, this is the origin of life. And women obviously embody that, because they grow babies, right? So they're more which we call yin or negative, or their lower body is more pronounced, is more developed than a man. So they exist more for that. While men are more, we volatilize that energy, we bring it up to our minds and our hearts and our hands, and we use it. We don't really store it as much as women do. So Anyway, I'll leave it with that. Of course, check the links in the description if you want social commercial stuff, and have a nice day. So I really like this image. Like, I really like it. I think it's so cool. And I found it online. I'll just quickly scroll through. So firstly, you can see we have animals here. These are all the animal related works and jobs and such. And then we have things like resources, horse, cow, sheep, pig, antlers, wool. I don't know what a teasel is, but this is a medieval economy diagram, basically. So resource, which then leads into producer, which then leads into processor, which leads into manufacturer, which leads into mender or fixer. And then we have vegetable here, so herbs, grain, flax, heavy timber, etc., etc. So farmers would make it and foresters would gather it, I guess. And then we have people who process it, apothecaries, scribes, painters, carpenters, mostly just carpenters and millers and such. And then manufacturers, so people who make stuff out of, vegetable related stuff. Obviously your brewers and bakers, absolutely essential. I would also put carpenters in here as well. Carpenter processors, but they also manufacture goods. But I guess they have woodworker, that's, it's kind of their thing there. Basket makers, etc. And then finally minerals, lime, building stone, clay, metals, precious stones, etc. And then obviously we have our miners, we have our masons and our smiths, and then people like plasters, potters, tilers. It looks like the diagram is cut off, unfortunately. And then, of course, blacksmiths, to fix things and such, and tinkers, whatever. I love this. I think it's great. I think it's really, really nice. But it kind of gives you an idea, as in, economy, which is really just the buying and selling of goods. Business at its fundamentals is the buying and selling of things, the trading of things. Usually either physical or non-physical or digital products, or physical or digital services. Like massage is a physical service. A digital service would be like a digital therapist, right? A physical product is like someone who's selling an apple, and then a digital product would be someone selling an Apple NFT or a software, something, I don't know, some kind of software, right? Obviously, we need people to produce, so we have resources here, and then we have producers of resources. These are your foundational jobs, which farmer, miner, logger, miner deals with minerals, logger deals with wood, farmer deals with animals and plants, usually agricultural goods, right? Or hunter, of course, deals with animals as well. There are what you might think of as digital resources, or different higher level resources. Electricity is a resource, oil and gas is a resource, water is a resource. Even to an extent, information is like a resource that is a digital resource, right? And not just like books information, like physics and biology and math or whatever, but in people's data. How all these companies, they sell and data to advertising companies, right? That's a resource. And your producers are the people who are at a root level, because everything requires and relies upon them. If we don't have farmers and hunters, there is no food, just fundamentally. Then processors, of course. So this is another thing. So you acquire resources and then you process those resources. You acquire a tree, you chop down a tree. You need to chop it into, if we go here, you need to chop it into planks or logs or sheets or tiles or whatever you happen to be chopping the tree into, whatever major shapes, right? This is very important. It's the art of refinement. And usually we know it from metal, of course. metal, you need to refine the metal. You need to separate out all of the rocks and minerals you don't want. The raw quartz, maybe that's in your minerals, and just get the ones you want, and then you crush it up, and then you start calcining it, and maybe you mix it with heat catalysts and such, and eventually you make like a, and now of course we electrolyze metal to get a complete pure, like a pure copper or something, or pure iron or whatever. Same thing with animal products. If you hunted a pig, you got to chop him up. You got to separate it into the skin, the bones, the meat, the organs, and whatever else resources you want. Depending on the animal, could be the hair as well. Otherwise, things start to rot. And skin will rot if you don't prepare it properly, whether you're going to eat it or use it as leather. Hair will go bad if you just kind of leave it on the earth, and then the water gets into it, and bacteria and such. So you got to process things, right? And then after processing a resource, we can go into the manufacturing category. And the manufacturing category really just means using the processed material, the metal, the bone, the horn, the leather, the cloth, the cotton, and if it's a digital thing, it could be using the electricity, using the logic, using the program, using the functions of maybe software, and we're creating something from it. We're making software, we're making music, we're making videos, we're making, for digital resources, we're making chairs and tables, knives and forks, plates, we're making a lovely meal, we're making, what are some things here? Baskets and bags, sacks and cabinets. People are making like tools, hammers and saws and axes and needles, threads and needles to make making clothing. All of these things are essentially required to live. I've always thought about the idea, could we get to a state of perfection where we no longer need clothing and food and water and shelter? We simply just exist as a perfect being, and I think that is a state of immortality, and I think it's possible, but unfortunately most of us, I'm drinking water, hot water while I speak about this. We need these physical things, right? And people produce them, and we like our symbols almost. It's like, why does maybe a lecturer have a lectern? That wooden box with the microphone when they stand at the front. Why do they have that thing? I guess to put notes onto, but it's almost like it becomes a symbol. The judge's hammer in today's world is almost like a symbol that they hammer that block of wood. We like our symbols, we like our physical objects, right? Finally, the last category is mender, which really just means repairer, right? Like a tailor, cobbler. Cobbler fixes shoes or makes shoes. A tailor obviously fixes and creates clothing. Blacksmith, if you buggy your axe or your sword or your hammer or something, you would take it to a blacksmith, assuming you didn't know how to do it yourself. Then you would take it to them. So of course these people fix manufactured goods, and of course the manufacturer usually should be the mender, and sometimes the processor is the manufacturer, and sometimes the producer is also the processor, and sometimes the producer is the processor and the manufacturer, right? Finally, a little more on digital goods, and then we'll get to some more main points. So of course, if you want to make music, on a computer, you need to have synthesizers and software, right? These are almost like your processed resources. You're using a processed resource, which is a synthesizer or like a reverb effect or a delay effect, so effects, and then you're producing and manufacturing a song. So it works kind of similar on a computer, and essentially what happens is that if we look at like first world westernized countries, they give up a lot of physical manufacturing. What happens is that they first give up certain resource production and processing, and then certain manufacturing, and usually it's offshore too. China is the manufacturing capital of the world, I would imagine, followed by India. So Asia, around Asia, is the manufacturing and processing, and even to an extent, so production countries, Canada, US, Australia, and Africa, and parts of Asia are pretty heavy producers of resources. Because what's happened to some countries, Canada and Australia, most of all, these countries are just basically resource producers. And then they do other financial trickery, and then they have a very expensive housing market, and they try to bring in lots of immigration. So essentially they become these immigrant farms, bringing in foolish immigrants who think they will make lots of money, or marry a white woman, or live a better life, or whatever hell, maybe it's better for their family, whatever. And then they find out that everything's very, very expensive, and they get farmed, they get fleeced. They are a resource. These kinds of countries use people as a resource, and they get produced by their countries, and then they come to these as immigrants, as resources, and then they get processed by tax, I guess, and high expenses, high cost of living. I guess what's manufactured from them is money, so to speak. What I think is that when a country gives up manufacturing is when it starts to die. That's when the country's retired, essentially, because, as I said, reality works off these physical objects. Everything around you is a physical object, essentially, besides the air, besides the weather, besides maybe the flame of a candle, the light of a light bulb. Lots of stuff around you, pretty much everything's a physical object, right? And where did it all come from? Probably it came from China or India, maybe Thailand, Indonesia, who knows, some Asian country, because they're the only people manufacturing stuff. And chances are China will port over a lot of its manufacturing to Africa, once it has enslaved Africa completely. Currently, they're just financially enslaving Africa through, various loans and promises and such, building up their infrastructure. Potentially, maybe they will just use Africa as a resource country and they won't move their manufacturing over there. I'm not actually sure. We will see what happens. Everything's pretty much made from China. What if China says, hey, you know what? No more. We don't want to sell you anything. Of course, they're not going to. It's the same reason why there is no war with China. China doesn't need to go to war because they already make enough money off everyone. They already have everyone by the balls because all of these countries let them win, essentially. Gave them the keys because they manufacture everything. What do you do if you're a company that works with glass and you can no longer get glass because you're buying all your bottles and all of your your little glass utensils and whatever your powders that you need for this from China? You can't do it anymore because your own country doesn't make that. It doesn't produce the resources. It's like, can you buy several tons of plastic from your own country? And if you can you buy it cheaply enough? That's a big question. Because chances are they're going to it's going to be so expensive because of all these, red tape laws and such, that it's not even worth it, even if you can. And the quality, is it going to be good enough? There's a reason why everyone buys everything from China, right? And here's the thing, even China is going through the same cycle and phase. Chances are they will be like, okay, we don't really want to be manufacturing everything, Because a lot of it is, the whole idea of like the carbon emissions and reducing all that stuff. Now, I do think, I'm sure we can all agree, we don't want fumes and factory fumes and car fumes and all this stuff. It's not pleasant to be near all of that. Of course, demonizing carbon it isn't exactly the smartest thing, because we're all made from carbon. The plants are made from carbon. Literally, organic physical forms are made from carbon. So it is anti-physical. A lot of this stuff is anti-physical. That's why they get rid of all the manufacturing, they get rid of all the resource production, because this stuff is physical. It taps you into the physical world. When you work with the natural world, reality, when you mine a mineral and turn it into metal and turn that metal into a tool, you experience so much, you understand so much. It is such an educational experience, I imagine, to do that. If you grow a tree and harvest it and turn it into a table or a chair, you have learnt the process of nature. And that's what a lot of these other countries that are still producing are experiencing this. They're learning this. People in the first world Western countries are not. They are, and here's the thing, these first world Western countries moved out of physical manufacturing and resource production and processing into digital manufacturing, producing, processing, etc. But then they said, you know what, we don't really want to do that either. And they've kind of pushed that over to, whatever countries want to buy it and want to do that work, right? It's the reason why, the telecommunications industry is from India and Malaysia and the Philippines, right? You don't get a person from your country usually speaking to you on the phone. Sometimes you do, but, it depends on the company, of course. Because even those jobs have been offshored, right? The production of websites, the production of programs, digital goods productions, producing pictures and videos and editing, etc., and audio production, video game production, all this stuff. A lot of it gets, again, continuously outsourced. And the country is dying in a way. It doesn't want to do anything. It doesn't want to interact with reality. It just wants to kind of coast off the money that it's already made, off the glory it's already gained, but it doesn't want to do anything new. It's been there, done that. It created the wheel. Now it doesn't want to make any more wheels. It just wants other people to make wheels for it. So I've been trying to understand the idea of volatile and fixed in alchemy. And from what I understand, most of our materials can be either in a volatile or a fixed state. By materials, I actually mean more our kind of refined things. So what I mean by that is like the salts, the oils, or the liquids. And volatile means, I believe the definition is like gaseous, so it releases gas. So alcohol, like ethanol, is a volatile substance. Gasoline is a volatile substance. Hydrochloric acid is volatile. These, if you open the lid on them, you may even, if in the case of like a hydrochloric, you will see the mist, you will see the smoke kind of come out. With the alcohol, you'll smell it, or the gasoline, you'll smell it. And if you have a really high percentage alcohol and you just leave it open, it'll evaporate out of the bottle if you leave it like overnight. So there's a lot of like mythological ideas of a flying dragon or some kind of things relating to something becoming spiritual. You can kind of think of these things, right? So these are volatile liquids, while water is more of a fixed liquid, right? Water it can evaporate, but it requires a lot more energy, a lot more heat, a lot more light, a lot more pressure and vibration and such to get it to become hot and then become steam. And even when it's steam, it wants to become physical again. It wants to just fall down, right, and condense. So it's more, maybe I'm stretching the terminology of fixed, but if you were to compare a liquid that is quote unquote fixed compared to a liquid that is quote unquote volatile, you would compare water to alcohol. Now for oils, we'll probably know about essential oils. Essential oils are the very they are the smell oils. Essentially, it's the part of a plant or a substance, organic substance, so plant or animal related, which is, it has the smell in it, right? So probably we've all played with essential oils of flowers like bergamot or rose or orange, very lovely smelling things, right? And usually those essential oils are actually mixed with thicker oils, right? So like a vegetable or a seed oil or something, they are probably mixed in with those. But a pure essential oil is a very light, subtle, it's a volatile compound. Even when the sun comes up in summer, it shines light and heats the plants, and the plants release these volatile essential oils. And if you look into things like, I think, terpenes and ketones and all this stuff, if you want to look at it from like a scientific perspective, you can look all those things up, right? And I believe they are chemically some of these volatile essential oils. And of course in alchemy you would have the word a volatile sulfur. That's what it means. Well, when we're talking about the liquids like the alcohol and the water, this would be a fixed or volatile mercury. I don't really like those words, so I try to simplify everything, so it's, I just call it an oil or a liquid, or and a fixed oil would be the resinous compounds. Now these personally I think are the most important, maybe followed by the salts in any kind of alchemical preparation. If you're using it for like a medicinal or therapeutic or supplementary reason, I think that the thick resinous oils are the most kind of bang for your buck, especially if mixed in with the salt. Reason being is that an essential oil is, again, it's a volatile, anything that's volatile, if you take into the body or you rub into the skin or spray into yourself or whatever it happens to be, it's in one ear, out the other, It's very quick. The same way alcohol is, you drink it, high percentage spirits, and it just whoosh quickly, through your whole body. And that's why alcohol is used in alchemical remedies, to actually quickly circulate and to volatilize things and get them so it does kind of go through you. But you got to think the volatile oils will quickly affect you. They will affect you in more spiritual, more energetic ways. The same way that a mood swing is a volatile illness, right? While a chronic lower back pain is a fixed illness. It's a long-term thing. A mood swing is something that happens every so often, right? Or like a temporary lethargy, you just kind of feel a little bad. That's, it's a volatile, it's a temporary thing. Well, a fixed thing is like you wake up and your feet are numb, throat is sore, your eyes are all maybe you have like an eye issue and your and it just doesn't go away, right? And then you have to treat it with a more fixed thing. Well, like a temporary gut ache is a volatile thing, and it can be quickly fixed by a volatile substance, you would assume, right? So anyway, the resins are essentially it's what I call the essence of something. And essence is its primary, usually the taste. It's where the flavor of something is. We'd relate it more to the water element, maybe, or the volatile essence, which is essential oil, is a bit more related to the air. And you get the fixed essence or oil from just simmering things. And there's different fractions of oil. For example, there is the what I think of as more the syrup. which is like a candied caramelized syrup. Through heating it, it caramelizes, right? And it's becomes syrupy. And then there is a lower form, which is like a lard, like a fat lard. It's a solid actual oil. And this, if you work with animal products, you will get a lot of this like fat lard. For plants, it's more the syrupy component. Plants do have a lot of volatile, like higher volatile oils as well. So, there is that. And then for minerals, for salt, which, minerals has the most quote-unquote salt. Most ores, you would think, or minerals or all these things, it's more of a fixed salt or fixed, mineral product, right? Which, if you want to know if a salt is fixed or volatile, you can leave it in the air. If you leave it like on a dish or a tray or a plate or something in the air, it'll evaporate. So a sodium or potassium hydroxide will evaporate if left on a tray. And if you have a sodium or potassium carbonate, which is more of a fixed salt, or technically an ash, depending on what state it is, you can leave it there to collect moisture and it'll become more volatile. Because if you leave it out too long, it'll volatilize and you won't have much or anything. So you can also distill volatile salts, and you'll see these. It's like ice forming on your receiving end. Where you're distilling it into, where it's condensing. It'll crystallize like ice. I've had this with some kind of animal operation with like an ammonia salt. I don't know if sal ammoniac is a volatile salt. I think most ammonia based salts are volatile salts, meaning you can distill them over. And of course, technically you can dry distill some salts like aggressively, and then that volatilizes the fixed or volatilizes the stable, which really just means turn the physical solid thing into a gas or an air state, and then hopefully recondense it to a liquid. Of course, depending, sometimes you got to run it through water, or else it'll just, it will not recondense, depending on what you're working with. And then, of course, a fixed salt would be, if you get like the plant salts or the bone ash, this is something that is fairly stable. It's like an ash. It's more of an ash than it is a like a crystalline white, or like a clear crystalline. Usually the volatile salts are more of like a clear, maybe lightly white tinted or lightly yellow tinted, but usually like a see-through salt, right? So anyway, hopefully that explains things. Really, all it just means, fixed just means stable or solid or physical or more heavier, and then volatile just means basically something you can distill over in a like a alembic or a retort, or something that will evaporate. And you have to be very careful. You have to keep it bottled. You have to keep it sealed, or else you will lose it. And of course, the fixed things work more on the actual physical solid body, and the volatile works more on your emotions and your mood and your mind state and your energy and feeling and such. So it's a bit like alcohol, you drink that and it's like, whoosh, you feel good. You feel something, you're really feeling it. Or if you smoke something, it quickly affects you. It goes into the blood. It affects you instantly, nearly. But it also purges out quickly. Your blood, it purges whatever you've smoked out quickly, right? It only gives you like a buzz for about, 20-30 minutes. Well, if you eat something, your digestive system is continuously processing that, and you're going to be feeling it and be under the effects. While it's not as strong, it's more of a in-body, more of a dense effect. You're still going to be, under that for a longer time. So that's more, that's better on the body, right? I guess you could think it's a bit like eating cake versus smelling, like imagine like a really sweet cake, you could smell it, it's like, oh, that's nice. Or you smell like a roast meat, you smell it and it smells delicious, and you salivate, and compared to eating it, that is the physical, that is the fixed, the solid, while the smelling it, the seeing, looking at it, smelling it is the volatile. So you only kind of engage in your head instead of your digestive system in your body and such. So anyway, hopefully that clears some things up in your own practice, and I still got to understand this properly. Maybe I can do a video showing all of these later on if I get the time. That'd be kind of cool. And of course, otherwise, check the links in the description, social, commercial stuff, and have a nice day. Goodbye.